Good afternoon. Very pleased to welcome Mr. Mike Penrose from Future Plus in the UK. Thank you very much. You are into ESG, you are into risk, you are into venture capital. How do you position your platform, especially for the SMEs and for the startups across the world, and why Dubai today?
Gotcha. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks very much. Very much what we look at with Future Plus is how organisations can understand, measure, manage, improve and report their ESG and sustainability, but in a way that is really easy to understand. We take away the complexity, all the academic jargon, the language, all the stuff that makes people feel it's difficult, and we make it easy for them to do it. But we also do it in a way that's comparable cross industry, cross sector, which then, for us, the most important thing is that aggregation of data that allows things like Scope 3 reporting, allows things like proper social impact programming to be measured and understood at scale. So we try and take away the difficulty, take away the complexity, and we make it three things, we say, which is accessible, achievable, and affordable. We keep it low price.
Here in the Middle East, as you know, they just announced the unified ESG laws for the publicly listed companies, and many tend to believe that it's too soon for the SMEs. How can we entice and include them?
I think critical for me is all of the onus, all of the things, for example, in the reporting that's coming on supply chains. It's all well and good getting the data from the big companies, but as they are required to do in the future, Scope 3 reporting, or start looking at their supply chains, you can guarantee the majority of their supply chains are going to be SMEs. And unless that data can cascade up and down, unless they can report what's going on amongst the SMEs, they won't actually be able to comply. So then the pressure goes on the biggest companies to help and actually support some of the smallest, understand what it is, and then have access to the type of guidance and support they need to improve.
But in terms of methods, for example, it might be a complex exercise for SMEs and startups. How can we include them and educate them?
And I think this is one of the critical ones. We all think it's complex because predominantly in the past it's been academic in nature, and a bit like the big four consulting groups as well, that there's a certain value in making things complex. Actually, it's not that complex. And one of the things we've tried to do is simplify it right down, make it actually easy to understand. We talk about Scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. Actually, if you just talk about the energy you buy in, the carbon you produce, and what happens outside of your company and your supply chain, it's much easier. So we've simplified it down, and we give people guidance and support. We don't just ask them difficult questions and expect them to provide
Which
the data.
sectors you might be focusing on in the Middle East and globally?
Our biggest at the moment, and the one we've had the most momentum in, is the hospitality sector, especially luxury hospitality, where there's a perception that luxury cannot be sustainable. It can, very much so, and actually has become now part of the selling point and the brands. So a huge amount in hospitality, which is obviously very
active in the Middle East, especially in the
Middle
UAE.
East. So we have work in the UAE already, in Saudi Arabia and other countries, in terms of allowing the hospitality and hotel sectors to become more sustainable. Technology as well is a huge one. It can be both the solutions, but also inadvertently the problems. There's a huge amount of crypto here, for example. There's a big amount of startups which will require data centers. These are some of the biggest carbon emitters on the planet. Cryptocurrency recently, depends who you ask, the amount of carbon it produces is equivalent either, depending who you ask, to the country of Chile or Argentina in terms of total carbon emissions that are going out. So again, it's about that education, and it's about helping organizations understand the impact they're really having. So hospitality, technology and crypto we do a lot with. We do quite a lot with law as well, because again, with all this legislation coming in, people need to understand what it is they need to report.
Construction?
Construction, a lot.
How can you help construction as they have a big supply chain?
They do, and actually 40% of all carbon emissions and environmental impact is attributed to the construction sector. Now only 11% of that is attributed to the actual construction of the building. The rest of it is what happens afterwards.
Yes.
So the plant machinery they put in, the choices they put in.
We just published an article precisely
Absolutely.
on what you are saying.
And with on that one, where we got a lot of traction I presented today to the construction industry is the understanding of the impact that the developing legislation will have on the devaluation of assets. What we're finding now is people who are putting in unsustainable plant equipment in a hotel are then writing that off over 25 years in terms of the lifespan of the building. What they're likely to find is within 6 to 7 years, because of developing sustainability legislation, it will become obsolete. So that means they're having to write off a 25-year devaluation in 5 to 7 years, which is lowering the value of the asset. That incentivizes the big companies to push it down, as you said, into the supply chain. Where do you get high environmental steel? How can you get low carbon concrete? Where do you source your wood from? And once that starts being cascaded down, we have a real opportunity to make the construction industry a lot greener.
Mr. Penrose, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.